We are witnessing a rather profound crisis in the world today, and this is very evident to all of us if we turn on the news or open the paper or look at the internet. At the root of this crisis is something moral and spiritual. A lot of people have turned away from God and put in his place themselves, and that's what Jesus warns us against. He says, you can either love God above all things, or you can love yourself above all things, but there really isn't any other third option. And so today we see that many are turning away from God and exalting themselves. And this leads to degradation of human dignity and to relativism that says that every individual gets to decide what is true, what is good, and what is evil for themselves. And this really creates a rather cruel society to live in. So what are we to do as Christians? Well, Jesus came to save us from the reign of sin and death and to give us new life through baptism. And so one thing that we know that we ought to do is to have a spiritual response. There are many ways we can respond to this, but one is spiritual, because St. Paul reminds us, we are not contending with flesh and blood, but with principalities and powers. It is not this person or that person or these groups of people or those groups of people. It is truly the evil one, Satan, who is our enemy, the father of lies and a murderer from the beginning. And so we should respond firstly to this spiritual crisis. And today, I just want to offer two simple things that we can do as Christians to try to combat this crisis. And the first is simply to go to Mass and to invite other people to go to Mass, because the Eucharist is the world's redemption. Jesus, the incarnate Son, founded his church and entrusted to her the sacrifice of the Holy Mass, which is to renew and perpetuate his perfect offering on Calvary. So every time we come to Mass, we renew that perfect self-gift of Jesus Christ to the Father, and we adore God in the way that he wants and the way that pleases him. And this puts us in touch with an inexhaustible treasury of graces for ourselves and for others. So every time we come to Mass, we pour out on the world more and more graces. And so we should try to come as often as possible, every week, of course, but perhaps even more often. And if we can't make it because of illness or some other serious reason, then we should send our guardian angels to be present at Mass for us and unite ourselves spiritually to the holy sacrifice, because again, it is the world's redemption. So that's the first response, to go to Mass. And you are all here, so you're doing a good job. And then the second one is to pray the Rosary. And I say this often, but I really and truly mean it. The Rosary is like a bouquet of prayers offered to Jesus through Mary. It is very pleasing to heaven, and it is a spiritual weapon. Padre Pio, the famous Italian priest and stigmatist, often said this. He encouraged others to pray the Rosary because he said, it is a synthesis of our faith, it supports our hope, and it is an explosion of our love. And so he himself would pray this Rosary day and night without tiring, one bead after the next, over and over. And he told everyone that this is a way to combat spiritually the powers of darkness. And it is something that he did even till the end of his life. Even on his last day, he told everyone to love Our Lady and to make her love and to pray the Rosary. So that's the other thing that we can do. If we don't pray it, we can start. If we do pray it, we can pray it more. And if we pray it a lot, well, we can even pray it more often if possible. The Rosary and the Mass. These are two primary spiritual ways that we can combat the crisis in our world today. And if there is anyone that thinks that prayer is not effective, those people don't have the true Christian spirit, because Jesus assured us that our prayers have an important effect in the world. He reminded us today in the gospel that we are to be considered the little ones. His disciples are truly little and hidden. And today it might seem like we are greatly outnumbered, but that is fine. Jesus told us that we are to be 11 in the world. And you know that the yeast is just a small part of what goes into the bread, but it has a very important effect. So we as Christians ought to respond spiritually through the holy sacrifice of the Mass and the Rosary, and this will have a leavening effect on the world today, and it will be our first response to the crisis that surrounds us.